Hello! Today we'll be talking about the HDZero Goggles, and these were very kindly supplied by my friend Gav over at Your FPV. Check his store out, especially if you're in the UK, to see what's going on. Now, I'm filming this video a bit differently because I looked at these and I thought, wow, these could be the most versatile goggles I've ever seen. So I thought I'd go ahead and play with them and mess around and do the conclusion first. Yes, these are, I think, the most versatile goggles on the market right now. And to find out why I think that, watch the following pieces of footage that I did. And then come back, and at the end we'll have a different conclusion where we talk about what's good and bad, how it's different from something like Walksnail, what you might prefer, and it depends. And spoiler alert, there is no what is the best goggle ever, because it doesn't exist. It kind of depends what you want from them and what sort of things you need to be taken into account. But these can do an awful lot. Let me show you why. Keep watching.
Okay, well, it didn't seem right that I didn't at least do an unboxing, so this is a quick one. This is what came in the box. First off, you've got this little quick start leaflet, just tells you the basic controls. And then underneath this bit of protection, you've got the goggles in the loudest bit of plastic bag I've ever seen. So let's get these out, and what I'm going to do now is just show you what they look like and the underneath. Let's pause on the underneath to go through the ports. So there's quite a lot here. Let's go from left to right and just talk about what we've got. You've got AV, and that's an in or out, so you can put video and sound in or take video and sound out to something like an external DVR. We've got the SD card in a decent position, not just like over the bridge of your nose like a lot of goggles do. HDMI in, fairly obvious, and if you want to connect other digital systems like the Walksnail VRX, which will attach, that will attach there. You've then got these little dials, so that changes your diopter. You go from 0 to +6 and -6, I believe. It doesn't actually show 6, but I'm -6 and I can see fine. And you can move those in and out to set the IPD of your eyes correctly. You've got HDMI out. Come see that in a second. You've got that little headset symbol. This is your mic input and headphones, so if you like to listen to what's going on with your quad, you'll want to use that. The little sort of JST connector up there labelled FW is for firmware updating for VTXs. So to update a HDZero VTX on a quad, you would plug it into the goggles, put the firmware for it on the goggles, and then update it through the UI. And finally you've got HT there, which is the head tracker, which it has built in this system. So also in the box is the accessory box here, which is a bit awkward to get out, bear with me. Here it is, and if we open up the accessory box, we've got a bunch inside, including the goggle straps. This is the best system of strap I've seen. It's so easy to put on. That's worth mentioning. You've got these little cables here that are used for the firmware updating, a little lens cloth, and then you've got the foam padding that actually goes on the eyepieces of the goggles there. Now the reason that's not already attached is because it comes with two face pieces depending on the shape of your face, and I found the best thing to do was pretty much to put that foam inside, put my head against it, and then see if I could have any space. The ones that actually were included were the ones that fit fine to me. You'll also see there I've picked out a bag to put your goggles in and carry around, and there's a XT60 where you can plug in a battery. I've also got the expansion unit here, so I just thought I'd show you what this looks like. This attaches to the side of the goggles and is an extra you can buy. And what you can do with this is attach your analog module as well as having Wi-Fi. We'll come to that later, but that looks like this. So that is the exciting unboxing. What I wanted to do next is show you the UI of the goggles using the HDMI out, but I hit problems when trying to capture this on my capture card. I was getting this, and I think it's because it's coming up using a bit of an odd hertz rate when I checked it on my TV. If you plug something in, then it will change depending on what your VTX does. But this is the actual UI filming my monitor. I really like the UI, and I like the way you can move around using the wheel. That's really good. So it tries to scan to find out what's going in. It's got all the sources here, so you see there's multiple things you can do there. Image settings, I kind of like that when you go into image settings, what it does, the idea is here you'd have a connected VTX, so it would basically say, okay, here's what your camera is showing. Now you can adjust those settings to show you what's going on. Obviously I didn't have anything connected here, so it's a bit of a moot point. I did just mess about with the OSD mode. As I'm using 16:9 goggles, I figure I might as well have a 16:9 OSD display. So coming back and going down, we've got ways to change the way power's done, and you can change other things like turning the analog on. We've got fans there, record options. I've changed this around a bit. I've put it onto MP4 instead of TS, and you see you've got an audio source there, which I've changed to the mic. This is a slightly older version which I've since updated. I'll talk about that later. Again, this is how auto scans, and this was the connection at the time. If you've got the expansion module, going on to head tracker, just turn this on, so I could just move the goggles around, and you can see that works quite well. You can see the pan, tilt and roll available there. So yeah, we definitely need to try that out, don't we, to see how it works. I did try to sort of capture this footage, and I couldn't get the goggles in a good position where I could really show it and to TV. Moving on down, we've got playback. I did turn on a little quad quickly just to show what the playback would show, and you've got the option of recording with or without the DVR, so it's burned in the movie rather than having like subtitles like Walksnail would do. And then the firmware is the next one, and let's pause the video on the firmware a second, because as mentioned I did update the firmware on this just slightly after I did this. I didn't record it because it was too much hassle to try and get the thing set up on HDMI, but updating the firmware on the goggles is very easy. You put the firmware on the root directory of the SD card, and then you basically say update goggles. Updating the VTX I found a little more well, not quite as smooth, and I think part of this information, if you look to find what firmware you need to use, there's no two-way communication, so it doesn't know what's on the other end. It doesn't know if we're using a Whoop Lite or a Whoop or whatever. I found out we had a Whoop Lite, but then when you extract the file, most of them are just called HDZero TX.bin. I'd like to be able to have different versions in case I want to flash different things, because obviously the name's exactly the same. But you just go ahead and you take the SD card out of your goggles, you stick the firmware on, you can see the goggle firmware and the VTX firmware I've got there, and then flashing the VTX you have to connect that little cable and then use that flash VTX option from the UI, which is really quick actually, and actually pretty easy to do. It's just feels a little bit awkward for some reason. Finally, on the UI you've got this focus chart, which is pretty handy if you're trying to set up your diopter and your IPD right, just to make sure everything is looking clear in the goggles and you've got the right field of view there. So what I did then is turned on the little quad I had and scanned for the channel, and it came up right away. There's no binding your VTX to the goggles like other HD systems. It broadcasts and then you can see yourself or not see yourself. So this is all kind of default in what's happening, but yeah, it just works, which is kind of neat. Auto recording is on, so if I simply unplug the power from the VTX or the quad itself, you'll see the recording indicator goes. We can come back out of there and waiting for the TV to catch up. We can then go into playback and just make sure that my DVR is recorded, and there it is.
Well, I can wait no longer. I wanted to check this thing out, and I suppose one thing the HD goggles don't come with is their own antennas, so I had to quickly source some. I thought, oh, I can just use the Walksnail ones, but they are RPSMA. These use SMA, much more obvious for FPVs. Almost everything's SMA these days. So I've got two of these cherry antennas, and I found two of these Foxia like patches, except one screws in directly and one's on a little thing, so it doesn't exactly match up, but never mind. The reason I wanted to film this is, firstly, I just wanted to try them out and see how it was. Secondly, the DVR recording allows me to speak and use the microphone to do my own sort of commentary, which goes on the DVR. And I thought that's really good, because I'm always having to do voiceover stuff, and I'd much rather do it there, and sometimes you forget what's happening and stuff and you don't capture reactions. So I'm going to try out the little Happy Model quad. I haven't really done anything with it. I went in, I changed the ELRS passphrase. It's on ELRS version 2 because of the version of Betaflight, which means I have to use this old Beta FPV radio. But I figured I'd do a review of this separately, so it's not really about flying this, it's about sort of getting an impression of the goggles, how it feels. I haven't even hovered this though, so I'm slightly worried what this is going to be around, what this is going to be flying it around the house, but I'll be able to hopefully give some commentary. So let's turn this on and see if we get a DVR recording thing. So we've got a recording there. So this is from my camera, and if I do this, this should be the voice that's going into the DVR from this little guy. So yeah, let's try flying it, see what happens, because I've no idea what this is going to feel like or anything. Apart from setting up, as I said, modes and stuff. Well, that's it. So we are on angle. I don't really like the DVR layout, but as I said, I didn't really change it. So let's arm it. Whoa, that is not small. Quite rapid. That camera angle is up further than I thought. Whoa. Yeah, that's way up. My house has never been quite as dirty as it is today because there's stuff everywhere. My daughter's about to go to university, so yeah, there's garbage. Wow, this really wants to go fast. So whoop. Maybe I should put that camera angle down first. Okay, so we're downstairs. Now, you might have noticed that that clip stopped early. Why is that? Because the internal microphone mostly picks up the fan noise, and it's quite quiet when you speak, so you up the volume and then mostly hear fan. It's okay if you don't want to use this thing in a video or something, if you're just talking to yourself and want to memorize stuff. But for other things, you will probably need an external microphone, and I found this old lavalier mic, which is not particularly useful because it's got a great big long bit to it. And this plugs in, they call this line out, but it's obviously got a sort of headphone and mic jack symbol there. I've seen much better ideas, sort of mics about this big that just plug directly in there. But for what I'll do, let's refilm that using this mic, and so you'll be able to actually properly hear me with any luck. So let's turn this guy on, and let's see if you can actually hear what I'm doing this time. So, take off. Like I said, this little quad's got a lot of power. It's quite spicy. I think it might need a bit of a throttle range or a curve, because there seems to be this point you go past and it just wants to go up. This is a load of stuff. My house has never looked worse. My daughter's just about to go off to university. She's packed all her stuff ready. Whoa, oops, crashing. Wait, no, we're good. It's fine. I just caught something. So this is not really about the quad, as I said. This is about how the goggles look, and pretty good. There's obviously breakup. Oh God! As you can see, I just hit everything I can possible. But it feels much more like analog. This is my torture test for little quads. I take them down here down the alleyway because I've got never-ending amounts of brick wall in between me and them, and yeah, it holds up pretty well. But this is running at 200 milliwatts, so you'd expect it to be pretty good. It's much easier to fly this outdoors. I think I'll take this to the woods when I actually come to review it properly. But yeah, there is absolutely no latency that you can feel. There's obviously plenty of breakup. Uh-oh, crashing again. But it's not off-putting, if you like. So, there's breakup, but it's not like the worst thing ever, if you like. If you want pure prettiness, that's where the likes of Walksnail and DJI come in. Lack of latency and stuff, that's these guys. So yeah, that all has to go in the car. Everything is everywhere. Dog does not like this quad particularly. It's very high pitched.
Anyway, let's bring it on back. Sorry, Woofer. I'm coming to get you. Here's me. Let's see if we can do a landing on me. No, I can just hit myself.
So that's just flying around the house with this little quad and mostly crashing, to be fair. As far as the picture from the goggles go, the thing that really strikes you the most is it feels like analog. It's all instant. There's absolutely no latency. To be fair, in Walksnail, it's very hard to pick up latency, but the fact it slightly varies back and forth can sometimes trip you up. Obviously, there's that breakup. I thought that'd be annoying, but after you fly around a while, it's not something you really pick up on. So that is just stage one, because I wanted to do that to just have an overview of like how it was to fly. But what I want to do now is install this. This is the expansion module. This will let me put my analog module on, so I'm going to put on my rapid fire and we'll see how that's going to work. And then we've got some other things this will do and more tests. So let's do that next. It doesn't exactly say how to do this, but there's this little expansion bay here which sort of clicks off, and then you've got this little socket you can install the expansion module into. So I'm just going to do that now, and I think there's a little screw to go in there. Okay, well you'll see I've gone ahead and installed the expansion module, and I've put my analog module in, which is the rapid fire. But what I also did is I turned on the Wi-Fi connection, and this will allow people to connect to the Wi-Fi network that this runs and be able to see your stream. And what about this? Instead of having to take like passenger goggles or something, if someone's interested, you could just say attach to my network, go to this IP address, run this. Now it does have to run this thing called an RTSP stream, which generally means running VLC media player. I've got it on my screen here, and you'll see that as I move the dial, it's a bit behind, so it's certainly nothing you would fly with, but it would be great for other people. And if I go ahead and plug in this quad quickly, so it might be a bit flaky, and you can see it's somewhat behind and not the best picture in the world, but I think people would get an idea from it at least. So yeah, that's working. I think there's some improvements you've done there, but it certainly works. If you've got someone with the right phone, with the right software, they can see it. It could be doing with being made a little bit easier. So maybe just being able to go to a web browser, although, then there's the overhead of the goggles running a web browser and doing its own stream thing as opposed to what it's doing now. But yeah, look, totally works. I've got Wi-Fi connected to the computer. It's streaming this. If I go back to the menu, let's connect something analog up, shall we, and see how that works. First thing you have to do, and while this is on the screen, it'd be quite handy, if we go down to power, you'll see there's a separate thing for analog power. So if we go into this, and we go to analog power and we press the button, our analog unit turns on. So you don't want both running at the same time, obviously. You just want to run your analog power when you want to and have it off when you're just running your HDZero. Anyway, I'm going to find something to connect to and have a fly.
Oh wow, it's a really good analog picture. Whoop. Just don't know if this little SPI receiver will actually survive going outside like this. Is the problem. Ooh, this torture test is not working so nice for this one. It says it's on 100 milliwatts, but this gets a real big interference from the 5.8 Wi-Fi stuff all around the house. Oh well, we made it. And hopefully this DVR recording is going to look really good, and it's still going to be recording my voice on the microphone. Okay, I'll take over in voiceover from here. You can hear there's a bit of feedback And what happens where we got this sort of flickety screen because of all the Wi-Fi, that is getting picked up in the microphone and mixed in as well, which is kind of annoying, but I guess that's just the way it goes for analog. I don't know why we get feedback. I guess if you've ever listened to your VTX back, if it's not one with a proper mic, you will get a bunch of weird noise, but that's what you get from it. But in terms of pitch, is really good, and the DVR records at 60 frames per second, which looks, I think, really nice as well. So yeah, analog does work really well. The only problem you've got there, or the only problem I felt I had, is if you're wanting to do a voiceover through a mic, then it mixes in with, you know, all the buzzing and essentially anything that's coming from the VTX as well. So if you've got a VTX with mic, you'd have all this sort of high-pitched whining and stuff. I'd be great if they can say just give me the mic instead of anything else. Okay, so on to head tracking, and I had a little bit of a problem initially because I had watched something and it said if you use the TR1, which means the Trainer 1 mix, you see it set up here on channel 10, it means you don't have to set up a trainer mode as I've got here on Master Jack. You absolutely do, and the way to do it is to set Master Jack and to use the TR1s. But because I wasn't using that trainer mode initially, it wasn't working. But while trying to diagnose it, I had the problem that I felt the output from it wasn't right. This is the PPM output from this little UAV device coming from the goggles, which looks absolutely crazy. And if we compare it whilst plugging in the train output of a radio, you see it looks absolutely perfect. So I thought this was wrong, and then I put it on a scope, and it was simply the problem. This is the scope, a cheapo scope attached to train output of a radio, and you can see the PPM stream here where the wave is high and the gap goes to low. So it's like it broadcasts high, and then the gaps in between each channel is low, and if we move the sticks you can see the little bars increase, and that big one is the frame gap there. If we go over to the head tracker output, you will see that it is inversed, where the signal is low and the gap is high, which I think the other thing didn't understand. So this led me to say, oh, maybe it's just the trainer port. And as soon as I turned on that Master Jack port on the radio had no problem understanding the inverted version of the PPM stream, and it's all working fine. This is attached to my Mini Talon, which I've got a new ELRS receiver which I still need to fly and do stuff with, and just waiting for the right day for that. And here it is on my Bixer, which I've still yet to fly with the new ELRS receiver I've got there. And that's got both pan and tilt, as you can see. Now, I've left this in just in case anybody else is caught in this problem. Hopefully not. Hopefully it's just my mistake, but useful to know just in case. I should also mention that the community has been now working on wireless head tracking using the Express LRS backpack that's built into the HDZero goggles to talk to the backpack on your radio and do it that way. I haven't looked at that yet. I thought I'd just check the basics. So what else can it do? Well, down here is my OpenHD wing connected wirelessly, of course, to this Raspberry Pi 4, which I've plugged in the HDMI in cable, and I can see my OpenHD feed. Now you're probably thinking, well, you could do that on your old AA3 goggles, couldn't you? You've got HDMI in, which is true, but that had a resolution of 640 by 480, which seemed a bit pointless, which is why I use those great big box goggles which had 1080p. This obviously is HD, so I'm running it as HD, which is great. The only thing this won't do is record HDMI input to the DVR, which is a shame, so I still need to use my tablet to record DVR. I don't know if that can be updated ever in firmware or not, but again, versatility is what it's all about here. So yes, versatile. Obviously we tested a little HDZero quad and that was pretty good. It was a lot better than I got in analog in terms of the breakup. There was certainly breakup, but it didn't wobble the screen around as much as the sort of Wi-Fi interference gets into analog. So that was quite good. There was still, as I said, breakup, that little weird digital breakup. I've seen that in DVR before and I thought that would be really annoying. But once you actually fly it and you're concentrating on what you're doing, that becomes less of a thing. You don't really notice it as much. It's a bit like how you don't really notice that much breakup in analog. And they're very, very similar in terms of how they work. I mean, these don't mess with the other channels.
these share, I think this goes R1 to R7 and a couple of F channels, and it sits on those individual channels. Whereas I think both DJI and Walksnail have been left-hand polarized antennas for their stuff. You can use what you like here. You use left-hand, right-hand. It just matching up with the other side of things. The other thing to note is, of course, the way this works, and what's different about it than DJI and Walksnail is this is kind of like this one-shot thing. The VTX sends what it's got, and if it's got like bits that can't be decoded, that's where you get the noise. Whereas things like Walksnail and DJI have a two-way system, so it's like it will send the frame. This may reply saying you're missing bits, send these again, and you get that sort of two-way thing, and thus you get a much nicer picture in Fat Sharks and Walksnail, but you get that variable latency where there's a two-way talking going on to get the right frame. And that can be a right pain for some people. Obviously, if you're racing, if you're doing bandos, if you're doing something where it's critical that you've got low latency and reliably the same latency, then these things become a lot better than things like Walksnail or DJI. The only thing I didn't test with this, because obviously we did HDZero, we did analog testing, we had a look at head tracking, and I plugged HDMI in to check I could use my OpenHD stuff with it. That was all good. If you are thinking, well, I kind of like Walksnail as well, I don't want to have to buy two goggles. I don't have it, but you can buy that thing that fits on top, which is the Walksnail VRX, and plugs in via HDMI. And at that point, you've got two possible digital systems, plus an analog system, plus another digital system using HDMI in. You've got quite a lot there. Now, I would say, for flying digital, I vastly do prefer the picture on Walksnail, but the kind of flying I generally do is kind of cruisy, and for cruising stuff, that's brilliant, this stuff. I wouldn't be so keen on flying, well, certainly not a race, but when I'm going through trees, I'm not taking many risks because there's that extra bit of latency and it's variable. I can't risk going too close, and it would be the same on a bando or anything really tight, and that's sort of where these get better. So although yeah, I love the picture on these, there's certain things that I wouldn't fly these with and I'd have to use these instead. One thing I don't like about the Walksnail, and that's vastly improved on the HDZero, is this little 5-way joystick thing, which when you're in the goggles and you're thinking you're going left, right, up and down, never turns out to be where you want it to. This is such a simple system and such a vastly improvement. It's simply a turning wheel which you can press in, and that the UI in this is way better than the UI you get in the Walksnail. That's my opinion on that one. However, I also notice on the HDZeros, even when I get my eyes lined up perfectly and I get it, you know, so it's not two circles and you just merge them together so your IPD is correct and it becomes one image. I get a little bit, I can just see the corners, so it's like the rounded edges. So it feels like the field of view is not quite as nice as what I get from the Walksnail. It's minor, it's not much, but it's there. Now, I'm aware that DJI you can fit an analog module to, at least the original goggles. I have no idea about the other ones. I don't like DJI, I don't like the ecosystem and the I must call home to my overlords in China before I will let you do anything. The analog module in DJI, as I understand it, would suffer from some latency from when it sort of goes and gets to the screen and goes through a scaler and all that stuff. The latency between analog to your eyes feels absolutely indistinguishable from using a regular pair of Fat Shark analog goggle. That's really good. Also, I really liked the recording. In most of the Fat Shark goggles, the analog ones, they are still stuck on fairly crappy 30 frames per second DVRs. This thing records 60 frames a second. It's quite comparable to the power play that I use on my analog goggles, and this is why you will probably see me wearing this from now on, because it does everything, and I don't have to wear a separate DVR to do recording. That's really good, and there's absolutely no latency that I can see on that one. It's a shame that when you've got HDMI in, you can't record that on the DVR, or in fact send HDMI back out again to work as like a through device. That's kind of specific for me doing OpenHD stuff, but it would be useful. But no, you can't do that. But DVR in both HDZero and analog, really nice, like that. Couple of weird things. You don't get any antennas. I felt that would have been nice. It's got these rails as well, where you can put patch antennas and connect them on there, and that really can make this quite a compact package, even with the antennas on. So with little stubbies there and these little patches on the rails, you can put it back in the bag without taking anything off. It would have been nice if they included them. I also find the update procedure for VTX is kind of strange, where you're connecting to the goggles and then with a wire connecting to the VTX and updating that way. All a bit weird. But yeah, overall, build quality is very good. The GUI and the OS on the goggles looks really nice. The HDZero VTXs, again, they're certainly a step up from analog. They're not as nice and pretty as what you might get from Walksnail or DJI, but they're kind of for different purposes, and I think that's to be thought about. But in terms of versatility, if you've not got a pair of goggles yet and you're getting into the hobby, and you know you don't want to put all your bases in like one camp and say I'm just going to fly Walksnail or something, because lots of people fly analog stuff's really cheap and can be easy and good fun to fly. So having something that flies analog, flies its own HD system, can fly Walksnail with an additional thing is a bit of a no-brainer. So if you're thinking I don't know which way I want to fall, maybe I want something that does everything, this is this. This does Walksnail, the end. This does everything except DJI, of course. But yeah, really impressed. Yeah, so check it out. Check out my friend Gaff's store at yourfpv.co.uk. Links down below. And yeah, expect to see some more flying with these. Even if I'm doing analog, you'll see me carrying these around doing the recordings from them and stuff. And after I did that first bit, I did go out and buy this little thing, about £5 off Amazon, and just plugs in like that. So I'll be able to speak directly into the microphone, and you can hopefully hear me commentate while I'm doing flying. Anyway, hope that review's been helpful, and I will catch you next one. Bye for now.
Well, you've made it to the end of the video, so thanks once again for watching. If you like what you saw, then please consider subscribing, and if you really like what you saw, then be sure to check out the link to my blog for a variety of ways in which you can help support this channel.